Okay, I'm going to address the elephant in the room. We're all thinking it. Why in the world is he wearing such an epic hat? It's a fantastic question. We'll get back to it at the end. But first, I want to quickly speak about Parshat Tetzaveh. Because the whole second half of the Parsha speaks about the inauguration, the initiation of Aaron and his sons as Kohanim, as the priests who are going to serve in the Mishkan. And part of that process is that they have to offer and eat an El HaMiluim, a certain ram that was brought as a korban, and this is like the inauguration of korban. And there are two psukim in the parsha that describe Aaron and his sons eating this korban. There are two consecutive psukim, but there's a crucial difference that exists between them, and I want to highlight that difference. In pasuk Kaf Tet, Perek Lamed Bet, the Torah says, "Ve'achal Aharon uvanav epesar ha'ayil v'talachem asher basal." That Aaron and his sons are going to eat the flesh of the korban and eat the bread that accompanies it. That's ve'achal Aharon vanav. But the next pasuk that also repeats this fact that they ate the korban starts ve'achlu otam. They're going to eat it, but you hear the difference? The first time was ve'achal in the singular. The second time was ve'achlu in the plural. Why does the Torah switch from singular to plural? Well, I think the answer comes from the second half of the second pasuk, which I didn't yet read. In Perek Kaf Tet, pasuk Lamed Gimel, the pasuk continues. Ve'achlu otam. Why are Aaron and sons eating this korban? Asher kupar bahem. They're eating this korban for the sake of achieving kapara, atonement, to wipe away all their past mistakes, so they could begin this new role on a clean slate. L'malei chadam, in order to inaugurate them, so they're able to be properly recognized as having this position of power of being kohanim. L'kadesh otam, in order to sanctify them, so that they have the proper spiritual level in order to serve as kohanim. The thing that the second pasuk has that the first pasuk doesn't, that the second pasuk doesn't just speak about the fact that they ate the korban, but gives the reason why they ate the korban. And I think this helps answer our question. If you're just looking at the action that people do, if several people are all sitting in the same room doing the same action, then you could view them as one homogeneous group, a group of conformity. Ve'achal, they're all doing the same action as one singular unit in the singular. When you start speaking about the reason why people are doing something, then you can no longer just view them as one homogeneous group. Because when people do something for a certain reason, they bring some of themselves into the picture. And then no two people are going to be doing the same action in the exact same way. And therefore you can't, in that scenario, once you understand the reason why someone is doing something, you can't view them as just a huge group, a one homogeneous blob, but rather ve'achlu in the plural, because each singular individual is doing this action in the exact same way. And in general, I think it's important to speak about when you're living life and doing things, to not just act and do the same action as someone else and check it off a box and to be robotic about it, but to really invest and put yourself into the action. Right? We say when you're serving God, how are you supposed to serve God? With all of your heart and all of your soul. You're not just supposed to serve God robotically, but you're supposed to put the entirety of you, the invest yourself into the action. And that's what the Torah is teaching us in Parshat Tetzaveh. That when it came to Aaron and his sons being inaugurated as korbanos, it wasn't enough for them to just do the action of eating the korban all as one homogeneous blob, but they needed to invest themselves into the action and put some of themselves into the service and make sure it wasn't just one homogeneous blob, but it was a bunch of individuals doing the action together. And I think it's an important lesson for us to keep in mind. Because there's a huge danger if we stop viewing ourselves as unique individuals, we stop investing ourselves into what we do and just start focusing on the actions that become one homogeneous blob. And we see a primetime example of this in the Megillah that we're going to be reading this coming Thursday night and Friday morning. In the opening of the Megillah, in the fifth pasuk, right, the beginning of the first parak, the Torah says that first Achashverosh threw a major party, and then he threw a second party. After the original 180 days, he threw a second party that lasted a week. And the Torah and the Megillah describes, Uvimlot hayamim ha'ela. And after the first party finished, Asah hamelech l'chol ha'am hanimseim b'shushan habira l'migado v'ad katan mishashivat yamim. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu threw a second party for the residents of Shushan, for everyone l'migado v'ad katan, from big until small. Why is this a necessary detail? To say from the great people to the small people, everyone was invited to this party. So you'd think it's a good thing. You'd think it means because Achashverosh is being inclusive and including everyone. The Malbim points out that this isn't such a good thing. The Malbim says, Lahashvot katan lagadol, to compare a small person to a big person. Meaning, Achashverosh wasn't trying to include everyone, but Achashverosh's point was to say everyone at this party is equal. There's no such thing as like having a higher status or lower status. Every single person is going to be treated here as the same. And almost taking away the individual aspects and the individual traits to make a person unique and just combining them together in one homogeneous group. And that's part of Achashverosh's plan. Because if you cause people to lose their individuality and they think I'm just part of a blob, then why should anyone try to invest themselves into something? If they're just another number, if in the count of human beings that exist in this world. So what's the difference between having 1,000 people and 999 people? I have nothing unique to contribute to the table, so why should I even bother trying? It's only when you recognize your uniqueness and recognize that even if there are 999 other people, there are 999 other people who are different than me, and none of the 999 people have something as unique as I do to contribute, therefore I have to invest. But if you lose your sense of individuality, you don't forget about the reason why you do something, that the soul and the investment that you bring to the table, you think you're just another number, then why even bother trying? And that was part of Achashverosh's trick. It's why the Gemara in Masechet Shabbos teaches us that Lo Charva Yerushalayim, why was the reason that Yerushalayim was destroyed? Ela b'shvil shehishva katan v'gadol. This ambiguous phrase that because the small and the big were equated. But it's the same idea. When you lose your individuality, then no individual is able to contribute something great. We have the opposite message at the end of the Megillah, right? Or it's also towards the beginning of the Megillah. When Esther comes to Achashverosh and tells Achashverosh that Mordechai recognized that Bigtan Vateresh were plotting to kill him. It's a small detail, but the Gemara picks up on the fact that Esther didn't just tell Achashverosh, Mordechai, that the Bigtan Vateresh were trying to kill him, but it says that Esther told Achashverosh that Mordechai realized that Bigtan and Teresh were trying to kill him. She gave credit to Mordechai. And the Gemara says, because of this, in the name of Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, that kol ha'omer davar b'shem omro, that anyone who says something in the name of the person who said it, mevig ula l'olam, they bring redemption to the world. If you give someone credit for saying something, then you bring redemption to the world. Because the Torah tells us, V'tomer Esther l'melech b'shem Mordechai, that Esther told Achashverosh about Bigtan and Teresh in the name of Mordechai. The reason why it's important to say something in the name of the person who said it is because when a person says something, they invest their heart, their soul into it. There's a part of them into it. And if you don't give them credit, then a big part of the message is the person who said it. And that's why when you recognize the person who said something, you're recognizing their individual and unique contribution to their statement. It's not just the words, it's not just the action, but it's the the individuality that they invest into it. And that's why when you start equating big and small, that brings destruction to the world, it destroys Yerushalayim, it leads to the whole mess that Achashverosh created for the Jewish people. But when you start recognizing people's unique individual characteristics, you don't just start saying everyone is equal, everyone is the same, but you recognize that everyone has something unique and individual to bring to the table. When they invest their selves and their souls and their wholes of themselves into the picture, then that's what brings not just destruction to the world, but rather redemption to the world. And it's the problem with all of our enemies. It's what we see when we're going to be reading Parshat Zachor. It's the problem with Amalek too. Then Amalek attacked us as one unit. They see this group stranded out in the desert. They're nechashalim acharecha, all the weak people in the back. They're all tired, and they attack us. But the Torah adds one more clause: V'lo yarei Elokim. They don't fear God. And the simple understanding of this phrase is that they weren't afraid of punishment. The rest of the world knew how great God was because they had witnessed all the miracles that God did in Egypt, and therefore they weren't willing to attack the Jews. Amalek didn't fear God, wasn't afraid God was going to punish them. They didn't recognize how powerful God was. But there's another way of understanding this pasuk. The few recognize that every single human being is created b'tzelem Elokim, in the image of God, that we each have a bit of godliness inside of us. Part of godliness means that we're created echad. We're created unique as one individual. Because God is the most unique being, the most unique existence. There's no one like him else that exists out there. So if we're created b'tzelem Elokim, in the image of God, that means each of us are unique, are characteristically individual, that there's no one else like us in the world. Each of us are a world unto it of themselves. And when you recognize that everyone is a unique individual, then you're able, then every time you destroy a single person, you recognize you're destroying an entire world. But if you're lo yarei Elokim, you don't fear God, and you don't recognize that every single person God made b'tzelem Elokim, then you stop viewing people as unique individuals, and you stop recognizing the horror of destroying every single life, because every time you destroy a single life, you're destroying an entire world. You start thinking these are just numbers. And that's why Amalek was able to get away with the atrocious and vicious attack that they did. Because they didn't fear God, they didn't recognize that each single Jew was created b'tzelem Elokim, in the image of God, and therefore each a world unto themselves, but rather that they thought it was just one big weak unit, and therefore they're able to attack the entire unit and just wipe out as many people as possible. When our enemies start dehumanizing us and start pretending like we're not individuals, we're just one big homogenous blob, then that's when the danger comes of destruction, of hatred, of anti-Semitism. when our enemies are able to recognize that we are unique individuals, each created itself Elohim, each when we live life, we invest our entire selves into everything we do. And we're not just ve'achal, we don't just all do the same actions as one homogeneous block, but rather ve'achlu, like the Kohanim did. They each understood the reasons why they were doing something, and we're investing their hearts and souls into something, and therefore when we each do the same actions, we're doing it for totally different reasons, and we're bringing different skills and different personalities to the table. That's when we recognize about themselves, and that's when the world is going to be able to finally realize that we're not just a group that has a lot of numbers or doesn't have that many numbers. Rather, we're a group of so many unique individuals who each have own unique personalities to bring to the table to invest. So why am I wearing this hat? Well, because I don't know. When I got this hat and started wearing it, everyone always tells me, "Oh, Ellie, that hat's so you. That hat is really reflective of your personality. Checks out that you're going to wear this hat." This represents my personality. I'm not ashamed to hide it. And for me telling the Dvar Torah, pretending to be someone else, that would not be the same as me trying to bring my full personality, my full self to the table, to invest b'chol vavi v'chol nafshi, to bring my entire soul to the table, to give my Dvar Torah. This hat helps me make sure I'm sharing Torah as a unique individual, something that's characteristically and uniquely me, something that no one else would be able to do. And I think that's the message to remember. The lesson we learned from the Kohanim, the lesson we learned from Esther, and the lesson we learned from the mistakes of Achashverosh and the mistakes of Amalek. That we're supposed to embrace our uniqueness. That we're not just a homogenous group, we're each a unique individual. And therefore every time we act, whether it's avodas Hashem or interpersonal reactions, we should bring the entirety of ourselves to the table, to do everything we do, b'chol vavcha, b'chol nafshecha, and invest the entirety of who you are to the table. And recognize that doing so is a manifestation of your Tzelem Elohim, of your image of God, of your uniqueness, of your oneness, of your individuality. Something important, you should all wear your own cap, not just when you give Divrei Torah, but whenever you live life. Make sure to bring your personality, don't hide it. It's part of who you are. God gave it to you intentionally, and therefore you have to use it. Everyone have a fantastic Shabbos, and a fantastic Shabbos Zachor, and a fantastic prayer. Now bye.